Thank you. I declare open this public hearing of the Senate Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport References Committee. The committee is hearing evidence for its inquiry into the importance of a viable, safe, sustainable and efficient road transport industry. I do welcome you all here today. This is a public hearing and a Hansard transcript of the proceedings is being made. Before the committee starts taking evidence, I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The committee prefers all evidence to be given in public, but under the Senate's resolutions, witnesses have the right to request to be heard in private session. It is important that witnesses give the committee notice if they intend to ask to give evidence in camera. If a witness objects to answering a question, the witness should state the ground upon which objection is taken. The committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground that is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request the answer be given in camera. Such a request may, of course, also be made at any other time. Now, I remind everyone in the room, please to ensure that your mobile phones are either turned off or switched to silent. Finally, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank all those who have made submissions and sent representatives here today. Now, it does give me great pleasure to actually welcome Mr. Rod Hannifey, and for the record, Rod, thank you very much, mate, to detour, so to speak, through your busy schedule while conducting life on the road. So for the Hansard record, could you please give your name and the capacity in which you appear today?
My name is Rod Hannifey. I'm an employed truck driver, and I appear as myself, as a person working on road and involved in industry and road safety.
Thank you very much, Rod. Now, this is the best part, because this is where I invite you to make a brief opening statement. This is very, very important, mate, so you're going to have the opportunity to tell not only the senators, but everyone listening through that, what you do, what hasn't been done, what needs to be done, and how do we do it. Over to you, Rod.
Okay, well, I have put in a submission to the inquiry. I'll cover some of the things in that. There is a couple of things that I wish to add that I hadn't considered at the time, and one is certainly the way that we are paid our living away from home allowance. I did respond to the inquiry questions, and it's sort of outside of that, but it's another part of it in that we've had so many opportunities where people have tried to change what we actually earn on the road. So at the moment, they virtually cut our living away from home allowance in half about 18 months ago. The industry all jumped up and down.
Sorry, Rod, they being?
The government.
Yep.
Or I suppose it's done through the ATO,
yes, it is.
But obviously done through government to that point. And where everyone else had an increase under CPI, they wanted to cut ours in half. The industry jumped up and down and said that's not reasonable. And yet when they've gone back and said, OK, we'll put you back to where you are, it is now locked in where my understanding is you are allowed $27 for breakfast, $27 for lunch and $47 for tea. That's the maximum we can claim. Previously, if you claimed above your $90 for the day, you had to provide receipts for the whole amount. We didn't have a problem with that, but up to that point you didn't have to provide those receipts. Sometimes they would ask you for a log or what you did, but now you can't even have $47 breakfast. Now, of course, a lot of us work during the night.
$47 or $27 breakfast?
It's locked in. You can have a $27 breakfast, $27 lunch, $47 tea, but you can't have a $47 main meal, or you can't have a $47 breakfast. And yet, because of the way that we work, if you have that big meal at night, the first thing you want to do is go to bed. So a lot of our blokes have light meals later in the day and have a big breakfast before they go to bed, because that's what they do. We are not even given that flexibility. And I did speak with Glenn.
Is that the ATO that's brought that in? Is that through the
That's
ATO?
my belief, yes. And now you have to, not only do you have to provide a receipt for every single thing that you buy, which means you've got to carry all that, get all the receipts, but they will not allow any flexibility whatsoever in those figures. And I don't think that that's fair and just. And it's just another thing in the list of things that work against us that make the job harder on the road.
So you prefer it went back to a daily rate?
A daily rate, and that up to that amount we shouldn't have to provide receipts. Now, it is getting harder and harder to live on the road. The roadhouses that we had that used to look after us have disappeared. And it used to be, you look for somewhere where all the trucks were on the side of the road, that's where you went for a good feed. You can't get there now. As a perfect example coming out of Melbourne, there used to be a bloke on the side of the highway. It was just a bitumen bay, and he had a caravan. He was the next truck driver. He looked after us. They turfed him out, cancelled his permit. McDonald's is in there now, and he's not there at all. And there's not as much parking in there. And at times, at Christmas and peak hour, you can't even get in the bloody place in a truck to use the toilet. Yeah. So we're going backwards in so many ways.
Yep.
In my submission, I've asked for two specific things. One is a national road standard. Now, at the moment, the truck that I have, and there's a photo of it on the card, it can read the impact of the road into the truck. It's picked up one bump at 2.3 G. Now, my steer axle runs at 6.5 tonne. That's a 17 tonne impact into the steer axle. That's on the Newell Highway. There is no requirement that that be repaired. There is no minimum standard that says our roads should not have too much deformation. Yep. There is no repair standard that says when they do a repair that it must meet that. If we don't have that standard, then every single one of those impacts comes into the truck, and that's when things fail. If I hit that bump, and it might be 2 kilometres later, it might be 2,000 kilometres later that the kingpin shears off because of that bump, I can't prove that. I know those bumps contribute, but I can't prove that that was the responsible factor. And of course, the manufacturers build a truck to a certain standard, but they won't tell you to what standard. Because as soon as they say to me, well, we built it to 2G capacity and I hit a bump at 2.3, they haven't built a truck strong enough and they're in trouble. So they won't tell me that.
Yep.
But if we don't have that standard, every single bump I hit works on the truck, it works on me, and then it goes back into the road. Now, we get blamed for damage to the roads, and if the roads are like this, no damage to the truck, no damage to me, I get to walk when I'm 70, and there's no damage to the road. But at the moment, as an industry, we get charged for road use, and we're happy to pay that.
Yep.
We get overcharged for what we actually do. We get people telling us put it all on rail and that'll solve the problem. We know that doesn't work. But without a national road standard that everyone is held to, we can't get the roads fixed. And as a perfect example, I've been asking now for over 5 years to get one section of road fixed at Yalarbin. I've rang them, I've explained the problem, I've sent them data, I've had them ring me back and say, yes, we'll look at it. After 4 years, I rang them again and said, if you don't fix it, I'm going to come out and jump up and down.
Is that which road was that one? Is that a state or federal?
It's a national highway. It's
Right.
it's the Toowoomba Road. It's the Gore Highway.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it is a national highway.
Yeah.
And there's a section of undulations like that. Now, virtually, I can get the wheels off the ground.
Yeah.
Doesn't that scare you? It scares me.
Yeah.
And yet, the last time I rang them, they said, oh, we'll send an engineer out. They said, yes, we agree it's buggered. It's still there. It's now 5 years since I first asked that to be fixed. And that's one. I can give you hundreds of examples like that.
Yeah.
The second one is a national rest area strategy. We now have national rest area guidelines. And we only have them because I rang Paul Redder, who was the CEO of the NTC, and I was involved in the initial guidelines 10 years ago. We had those guidelines then, but they weren't done properly. In that guideline, it was all written, but there was one diagram, and that diagram showed what is parallel parking, sausage sizzle. Now, if you run up and down the Hume Highway and all you do is run Sydney-Melbourne, then it's a 10-hour trip. If you're tired, you pull in, you have a half-hour kip, you go to the loo, you make a sandwich, you keep going, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If I've come from Brisbane and I end up on the Hume Highway going into Melbourne and I want a 7-hour break, and I pull into these parking bays when they're all lined up like that, I can't get any shade in the daytime, and there was a parking bay down here at Chiltern, first one south of Albury. They spent $1 million and we went from 5 marked bays, and there used to be 4 around the back. So if you had a fridge van, you'd park out the back so you weren't in beside the others. They spent $1 million on that. We went from 5 marked bays and 4 unmarked to 10 marked bays. They spent $1 million to give us one space. Now, of course, I was critical of that. They didn't like that. If they'd have spent that $1 million next door and given us 10 more spaces, I'd have told them they're the best blokes on earth.
Right, can I just jump in here if I may, just so for those listening as well, they being...
Well, it's different governments. Obviously,
States.
we used to have a national highway standard operated and controlled by the federal government. Mm-hmm. That is all now being given back to the states. So if I want to deal with anyone, I have to go to this state, then that state, and it just makes it harder, which is why I'm asking for national standards.
Yeah, and I didn't want to jump in on you while you're on a roll, but I know you'll be on a
No,
roll
that's
all
all right,
day
mate.
because you've been on the roll for the last 20, 30 years, whatever, and that won't stop with me interjecting you. But also, which is very, very important, Rod, is what consultation with the transport industry have these people have when they build these facilities?
Mate, and of course, I think the second last point in your inquiry is how do we have better consultation? And as you say, I've tried for 20 years. So I've rang Vic Roads. I rang them when I first found they were improving that bay. I said, can I have a look at the plans? Their answer to me was, no, it's copyright. I said, it's a parking bay. Oh, no, it's copyright because, it's being designed and we can't let you look at it. Then when they finished it...
In case you leaked it to the Russians or something.
Oh, exactly, yes. So after that I rang them again and said, look, I'm not happy. You've spent $1 million and we've got one space. How do you justify that? And they couldn't, of course.
No.
And I've asked so many times, I've said, OK, the Hume Highway is now duplicated. That's excellent. Victorian end has pretty reasonable parking bays. If you have a look, they are large. They are not perfect, but they do have good toilets. As soon as you come north of the border, it just turns into crap. It's improved slightly. But the biggest concern I have, and here is a perfect example, when we used to have the Hume Highway finished at Albury before this bypass was built, there was a big section of road and you could park 30 trucks on the side of the road. Now, it wasn't perfectly safe, but all the traffic went off and we
can
just
I
parked
also
on
say,
there.
Rod, that the prevalence of B doubles wasn't, am I right in saying, when that rest area was constructed, predominantly it was mainly singles? And
Yeah, although I'd
that
say,
right?
but as a perfect example, looking to the future, we're looking at B triples and AB doubles, and the parking bays we have now are designed for semis. There's a parking bay on the Shepparton Road, which is designed in the current context of B doubles, and yet to get into that parking bay, I have to come in, do a 45-degree angle turn where I virtually have that much gap either side of the truck, and as you swing in, you've got to go out with the first truck, and then you've got to have the trailer not hit that one. Then your back one cuts in because, of course, as it goes around a corner, you have the cutting off. To get into that parking bay is hard. To get out of it, you've got to drive over a concrete gutter to get out of the bay. It's also placed directly into the sun. So circadian rhythm is your sleep points are in late in the afternoon, at 2 to 3 o'clock, and it faces directly into the sun. Why would you design a parking bay to allow someone rest and to manage their fatigue that looks directly into the sun at that time of the afternoon? There's no shade provided. It's badly designed. You can't get in and out without either hitting another truck or causing damage to your own vehicle. And yet that is what they provided for us to manage our fatigue. So when we had those guidelines 10 years ago, I contributed, there was only one design. It only showed the parallel. I've gone to people that have built parking bays since and said, well, why did you build it like that? Oh, well, we looked at that design. Did you read the document? No, we just looked at the design and we built it like that.
So I think it's also, Rod, too, as we go through, for those that are listening that aren't from a transport background, if I may, we've got some wonderful technology in the federal parliament, but when we say, your truck missed that truck by this much, those listening out there have no idea how much this much
Exactly
is.
right.
So what Rod did is he put his hands apart and showed about 12 to 18 inches difference between the trailers. So
Yes.
you can understand that too. But also, Rod, we'd like you, because those of us that know the transport industry exactly know where you're going, but for those that don't, when we talk about constructing road bays facing into the sun, so you've got to pull up and you're not going to get any sleep circadian rhythms, not only that, maybe boiling hot in summer, bright as light, the bright light and everything, but not only that, we have stringent laws in this land that restrict driving. So I think you need to build that into the context too, if you could, please, Rod.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So we have what is chain of responsibility. Now, Australia is virtually world leading in that. I know that the Americans look at our chain of responsibility legislation to say that someone who says, we will give you a load, then when you get there, they mess you around for 4 or 5 hours and at no payment at all, no detention rate. Then at the end of that time, they say, well, you still have to be there in the morning. And that's how our industry has always operated. What the chain of responsibility is meant to do is spread that responsibility so that someone can't contract you for a load, then mess you around all day and still say you will be there in the morning. They are asking you to break the law to exceed your legal hours of driving. What chain of responsibility is supposed to do is mean they can't do that. Now, the responsibility and the intent of the legislation is excellent. The delivery of it, I'm the truck driver swinging at the end of that chain. You have a major consignee or a prime contractor that organises the load. There is so much rate cutting, particularly by the big companies, and so much pressure on rates that they will contract, they will chase market share, they will undercut someone doing a contract now. When they get it, they work out, oh bugger, we can't really make any money out of this, so we'll farm it out. We'll give it to subbies and we'll pay other people less money than we're getting. They can't buy at the rates that major company can. They can't buy 100 trucks or 1,000 tyres or 1 million litres of fuel, and yet they pay you less than what they are getting and expect you to do that legally. Then they say, oh, there's been a delay, you still have to be there. Now, if I refuse, you will never get a load there again. I don't want to break the law. I don't want to operate in an unsafe manner. But those people expect that of us. I have very little power as an employed driver to fight that. And as a perfect example, 5 years ago I wrote a story about distribution centres operated by the major supermarkets. Now, we have time slots at those sites. They will give you a 15-minute window in which to arrive. I've arrived at a site in Melbourne 16 minutes before my time slot to be told, you're early. I said, mate, fair go. By the time we have this conversation, I'll be, no, you park over there in the corner. You're early.
So when we say distribution centre, we're talking, and you may not want to say, Rod, and I respect that, but we're talking serious employers here.
Yes.
Like Coles and Woolworths.
Major national food chains, yes.
Foodlands?
Coles,
Metcash,
Woolworths, Aldi, Metcash,
yeah,
yes,
okay.
they're the four.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a struggling family business.
No.
Okay.
So, having got there, under the chain of responsibility, the law states that if I'm to be delayed more than half an hour, I'm to be given provision for rest. So if I've got to wait an hour, I should be allowed to park up and go to bed. I'm to be given reasonable facilities, and I'm to be given an estimate of that time. That site, 16 minutes early, I parked to the side. By the time I walk back, yes, now you can go in. 2.5 hours I sat on that site. I'm in a queue of trucks, so I have to keep moving up. Technically, I don't write that time down. That's breaking the law. But how can you write down 1 minute to move the truck up? And if I don't, the other trucks will go round you and jump you in the queue. If you go to bed, they will go round you. Now, they have it both ways. They have it where you must get here to suit us when I've travelled perhaps 1,000 kilometres and we booked that time 3 days in advance. Yet once I'm on site, there is no pressure on them to unload me. I've been to another site. What's the hold up? Oh, we're busy out the back. So the trucks that take the food out of those distribution centres to the stores are paid an hourly rate. Because I'm an interstate driver and I've come in with interstate freight, they're not paying me detention while I'm on site. And I said to my boss, do you really want to still be having this problem in 5 years' time? His answer to me was, if you, and my truck is very noticeable and we've got the company name on it, he said, if you go and raise this issue, we will lose our contract, then you will lose your job, because those people have so much power that if one company says, well, if you're going to hold us up for 4 hours, we will start charging you detention, they will go to the customer that owns the product and say, we don't want that company here anymore, or they'll ban me and I won't have a job. And how do you fight that? So when they chase market share, then that forces all that pressure down the line. The bloke at the bottom is responsible for the customer to be there when they tell you to. He's responsible to comply with the law on the road. He's responsible to be seen to be operating correctly on the road, and he's still got to get it there. He's got to manage his fatigue. He's got no facilities on the road. He's got no rest areas to allow him to do that. He has penalties that mean he can be charged $600 as a fine for being 15 minutes over his time. We're the only industry that gets fined for working overtime. And all of those factors then mean that drivers that do the job and that have done it for 30 years, and I've had a bloke come to me and say, I have never struggled so hard in all my life to be legal. Because what you did in the past, you drove when you were fit, and when you were tired, you pulled up and you went to bed. You would then manage your logbook. You would say, okay, I didn't stop here, I stopped there because I managed my fatigue. I pulled up when I was asleep. Now the logbook and these safety cams, and I'm in trouble at work now because of this safety camera here at Albury, that takes a photo of the truck, It tells them where I am and what I'm doing at what time.
And speed?
And speed.
Okay.
And the distance between. Now, you will talk to another gentleman in a couple of days who will tell you that all these offences where we're too close together or we cross a white line under the camera is illegal. But what that camera does, it puts pressure on me to be in a place and a time. Yes, years ago, the logbook was flexible, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Nobody I know wants to drive 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. We want to be able to go to work safely, feed our family while we're there, get a fair go and get home safely. I think that's the basis of our industry. We can't have anything. Everything in this room has been on a truck, probably 7 or 8 times. The tables, all the food, it all comes on truck. You can't have a rail car in the back of this facility that unloads the cups and the tables. So our industry, Australia depends on it. All we want is a fair go. I don't think we are recognised for what we do. I don't think that people understand, and
I might
that's
pull
why.
you up there, Rod. I don't think you're not.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why I've given you a card. I'd certainly invite any of the members of the committee to come and do a trip in a truck.
I'll be on it with you.
One of the things that I have a concern with is that in the past, those who were responsible for our industry either came from the industry, so had some knowledge of it. People in those days, it was RTA, it's now RMS, Roads and Maritime Services.
Well, it's well known to this committee, RMS. Okay.
But the thing is, they had people who knew trucks. Now those people that knew trucks and roads have all moved on. None of them have an on-hand or on-road knowledge of our industry, and they make laws with the best of intent. They deliver roads with the best of intent, but they don't travel on them. They don't live under the laws under which, nor the penalties that we operate under. So they don't understand the importance of those rest areas to us that we need to manage our fatigue.
Nor consult.
They don't understand the impact from the truck. Like, as I say, 4 years I've been ringing to get bumps fixed on a national highway and it is still not done. There must be some aspect that says if the road is dangerous, that I can ask for it to be fixed. They won't recognise the road as our workplace, and I understand why in some ways. I'm sure you've all seen where we are charged with being responsible for more accidents than everybody else sees as we should be. Yes, we are over-recognised in fatal crashes, but those figures are used against us and do not recognise the kilometres that we travel. So I do 200,000 kilometres roughly every year. The motorist does 20. In that time, I still have the same number of points. I'm liable for the same penalties and fines. And yet the people in the cars are not taught to share it with us. They are not educated about our industry. And when, if you look at the statistics, it's over 70% of major fatal crashes between cars and trucks are the fault of the car driver. We get the blame, we get the penalties, we get the blitzes, where they come out and they pull you up coming out of Melbourne at Broadford, and I've come out there were 27 police cars involved in one blitz. If you stopped at the parking bay before the heavy vehicle inspection bay, which I did to check my book to make sure everything was right, a police car came from the other end of that bay like he was on a drag strip. And he roared up to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm stopping to make sure that I'm right before I go to the weighbridge. I know you blokes are there. I'm checking to make it." "No, I want to look at your logbook right now. I want it now." That's what he said. And then you go to there was 27 cars involved in that blitz. Now, every car driver that goes past looks at that and says, "You truckies must all be drug-crazed axe murderers, and that's how bad you are." When they then put out the stats from that blitz, we found so many offences. But they won't tell you how many of those offences were one bloke didn't sign his logbook, had nothing to do with road safety.
Can we just explore this a bit more,
Yep.
mate, because I think it's extraordinarily important. And Senator Reddick, me coming from the West, the good old Wild West prior to logbooks was everything was legal until you got caught.
Yep.
And then we were dragged into the fatigue management. So I think it's important for the committee and also everyone listening. Not only are all these pressures, time slots, and we're not going to pay you while you wait, and you open your mouth, you're going to be looking for work elsewhere, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But please tell us more about the fines, because I've heard some stories in the last few months that are making my hair curl.
Yep.
About massive fines, about stickers, registration stickers not being up-to-date, rego stickers,
Yep.
not being on the windscreen because the driver hasn't been home for 3 weeks, the bill's been paid, it's sitting on the kitchen table, waiting for him to get home so he can put it on, and I've heard he's challenged it in court, and all of a sudden $2,300 later, RMS and New South Wales still find him. So let's talk a bit more about the penalties as well, because this is important. Not only are the drivers being screwed and squeezed, and the transport companies, it's the whole chain, but it's the kick in the pants you're going to get on the way through from the legislators too. So let's...
As a perfect example, 2 weeks ago there was a blitz. It was on Channel 9 News, truck sting at Gladfield Pads. Now Gladfield Pads is just over Cunningham's Gap, between the top of the Gap and Warwick. They had a television crew on site. Yes, it was on the radio. They're there, they're having a blitz, there's a television crew there. Now, what happened when I saw what went to air about a week later, there's a gentleman in the studio, bloody trucks. We caught these trucks, show this is what we've caught with all these trucks breaking the law. So they had a photo of a truck and he's going down a highway, had nothing to do with what happened at that site. This was previous footage. Yes, he was unlicensed, uninsured. They had the next bloke, they've got the photo again. We pulled up this truck. Now this is a tradies ute. He was drink driving and he was doing 56 in a school zone. Again, had nothing to do with that blitz nor that site. Then they go to the site, and here's the TV presenter with his camera, and he's out there at this site at night, and he said, oh, we've just shown this post on Facebook. Trucks have slowed down, and you can't get a park in any of the truck bays anywhere around here because the trucks aren't coming here. Now, why don't the trucks want to go there? If they're compliant, everybody says you've got nothing to hide. Yet, every time those blitzes occur, and you've heard stories, I know blokes that have been pulled in, they've gone through their logbook, nothing wrong with that. They've gone right around the truck, nothing wrong with that. Hang on, we'll have another look at your logbook. They will go back 3 months in your logbook to find one page that you haven't added your hours up and hit you with that. Now, what has that to do with road safety?
When we say hit you with that, or someone spelt the name wrong with the place where they pulled up.
Well, I don't want to say that spellings are wrong, because that's different. But this is something where you've done something that has nothing to do with safety. It's an error or an omission.
Right. But when you say hit up,
yes,
what does hit up mean?
It's a fine. Yep. But you get a fine for that. But that fine has nothing to do with road safety from an event 3 months ago.
Oh.
So when they had that blitz, they said no one's coming. When they put out the figures from that, they don't give us a breakup. Now, I got a phone call, there's a thing called Austrans, is a national blitz on trucks once a year. ABC Radio rang me and said, would you like to make a comment? I said, my bloody oath I would. And they said, what is your problem? I said, I've got no problem with being inspected. I've got no problem with anyone else being inspected. But when they do this blitz, they then come up with all of these figures and they say, we got so many offences. But they don't tell you that they pulled up 1,000 trucks. They got 200 offences. They will say, we got 200 offences, not how many trucks. So straight away the public think, geez, 200 trucks had an defect. That's terrible. I've asked, if they give us the breakup of that offence and there's something wrong, then we as an industry know we've got to fix something. But what they will do, they will say there was 200 offences, but out of that 200, 127 might well be one tail light or one tyre that has a patch the size of the palm of your hand that wasn't perfectly legal. Now, that's not a good thing, but they weren't all running down there with the tyres hanging off and shredded and no lights and the brakes falling off the truck. And they use those figures against us. They don't tell the truth with those figures, and then they use that to have another blitz to go and pay more overtime, where if they spent all of that money on that enforcement in improving the roads, in educating motorists, in giving us rest areas, then I believe that money would be better spent and we would have safer roads. There was a blitz in Dubbo, part of Austrans. The local cop was on the radio. Oh, he said, we've got 5 drug offences. Now, I rang the bloke and I said to him, I'm not happy with what you've just said on live radio, on Dubbo radio. What's the problem? I said, well, how many truck drivers did you catch for drug offences? 1. I said, but you're on the radio saying that you got 5 drug offences. He said, yeah, we've got 1 truck driver with 3 separate drug offences. I said, well, where's the others? Oh, we've got 2 car drivers. I said, which car drivers did you drug test? Oh, well, the ones that didn't slow to the 40-kilometre limit, we then gave them a ticket and drug tested them. So I said, how many trucks did you drug test? 1,203, one truck driver. How many cars did you test? 20 or 30, and they got 2 cars. Now, he did not tell the truth on radio. To his credit, he went to the next thing because this was an ongoing activity. Everybody knew they were there. In the next radio interview, he said, we got one truck driver out of 1,200. The majority do the right thing, and we recognise that, but we want to catch the bad guys. And we agree. We want them to catch the bad guys. But the way that the industry is abused by the power of the big companies, the way it is abused in the media, it's a truck accident. That implies guilt by default. And yet the majority of the time, it's not the truckie's fault. And yet we can't get the media to say it's an accident involving a truck, nor can we get them to tell the truth. Again, driving down the road, came on the national news, truck kills 5 people. That was the headline. Every single hour, on the hour, from about 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, truck kills 5 people. The following morning, once, on only one radio interview, did it say, it was found that the car drivers were drunk, they were playing chicken, the truck driver did nothing but go to work that day to feed his family, and yet he's been hung, drawn and quartered in the media, and yet we get one thing to say, it wasn't our fault. I can give you dozens and dozens of examples like that.
So, Rod, can I raise this with you? I've always been like all of us, if someone's doing the wrong thing, fix it.
Yep.
There's no argument. If there are people breaking the law, go get them.
Yep.
That's fine. And I have I don't have the magician's sleeve on, so there's not a secret hidden up here. Why can't we get to I want to get your thoughts, some sort of system, and I don't know what it might be, but if you're audited, and you've got all this, and you've done all that, and you've got your roadworthies, why do, God bless them, the coppers waste so much time and energy and money pulling up every single person? Because you see, what I'm trying to say is the ones that do the right thing are the ones that are always the ones that are in the firing line.
Yep.
How would we get around? Would there be a magic stick that glows in the dark or something on your truck? And I'm really being silly here, but I'm not, you know what I mean?
In America, they have what's called a pre-pass.
A pre-pass?
Yep. So they've got an overhead gantry when you come into the weigh station. And if you are generally compliant, so we have Truck Safe and we have NHVAS, and those two systems, one is operated by industry, one is operated by government.
Yep.
They do not get the same benefits in that system. There is an argument which one is more effective. But in the States, once you are generally deemed to be compliant and you meet a minimum number of standards, you are given a pre-pass. So it's like a toll reader. But as you come into the weighbridge, if you are genuinely compliant and you have met all the standards to get the pre-pass, then you are not pulled into the weighbridge. What happens now is the coppers know that because the truck is so large, because it does 200,000 kilometres a year, because it might not be brand new, if they look hard enough, they will find something.
So before I go any further, so Senator Rennick doesn't put me in a headlock and beat me up in the smoko break. I'm not looking for more registration, more regulation, more laws, but there's got to be some common sense, for crying out. I don't know.
The problem with common sense is it's not very common anymore, unfortunately.
No, that's true.
So all of those factors that I've discussed are forcing drivers out of the industry. Blokes say, I can go and drive a forklift, I can earn the same money,
Yep.
I'm not going to get a fine for working 10 minutes overtime, I'm not going to have some car driver try and kill me, and I'm home in my bed every night. I live in that truck 5 to 6 days a week. In 1 week, there would be 2 or 3 incidents where someone cuts me off, overtakes me unsafely. I save their life. I think that was one of the things our industry is never recognised for, the number of lives that we save by our behaviour, by driving professionally, by anticipating things. We get blamed when it goes wrong,
That's right, yeah.
and then when it does, it's terrible on the news and it's a catastrophe and people have died. We don't want that either. But we are forcing people out of the industry by all of these factors I've raised. We are then getting rid of a bloke who's driven for 30 years, never killed anybody. He might have had some logbook offences, he might have cheated the book occasionally, but he's driven when fit and slept when tired. We can't do that now because the logbook is so encompassing. And I believe the way the laws are going, we are made easier to be non-compliant and easier to be punished, harder to comply with the law. And unfortunately then we bring people into the industry who are not tested or trained properly. Now, I don't care whether someone comes from Alaska or Atlanta. If they come into our industry in Australia, I want to know that they've been tested and they are capable of driving that truck safely on the road. My understanding is that people who come from some international countries are given a licence here. I had a young bloke in Melbourne say to me, he said, "You'll be interested in this?" He said, "I went to get an upgrade to my licence." They said, "Oh, you've got to do a 12-month course." As he went to walk out, the bloke said, "Have you got an international licence?" He said, "Well, why the hell would I have one of those? I live here in Melbourne." "Oh, if you had one of them, I could give you a B-double licence today." Now, if that bloke's trained and qualified and tested and then he's let on the road, I've got no problem with that. But if someone comes here and doesn't understand our trucks, can't read our laws, is not tested to the standard that we are, and is let loose on the road, when he makes a mistake and he kills somebody, then we as an industry go back to, let's have another blitz and let's have another heap of fines and let's have more enforcement. Yeah. So those that do the right thing aren't recognised. They talk about having targeted enforcement, and for a company that's got a bad record, that may work well. But as an example, you know what a B-double is. So a B-double is you have the truck, you have an A-trailer, and you have a B-trailer, and the B-trailer sits over the top of the A-trailer. So you can never see the number plate on the A-trailer because the trailer sits above it. Now, under the law, that number plate must be visible from a 45-degree angle for when you go under a camera. Now, we took trailers for machinery, and when you take them up, you take them individually. So we take the A-trailer separately. It has no trailer on the back. There is a U-shaped section of steel within which the number plate sits. We were given serious infringements for every A-trailer that went up that had that U-shaped section where you could not see the number plate. Now, it's normally got a trailer over it. In the end, we all I had to say was, "That's not legal, can you modify that?" No problem at all. But we were given an infringement. They build up against the company when there is no road safety benefit from that whatsoever. So I asked for a national road standard that will improve both and reduce our maintenance. It will reduce the impact into the roads, which will reduce maintenance costs. It will lessen my fatigue and make it easier for me to operate safely. It will give better value, because at the moment I don't think we get value for the money we spend on our roads. No one seems to hold them to account. I've been told they go and do a repair. If it fails at 9 months, they wait until 12 months are up and then they go and hit them to rebuild the road again, and we get a lousy bit of road. We need a national rest area strategy so that we can have sufficient rest areas to sleep when we need that street. Yep. We need better and improved driver education so that young people understand trucks when they get out on the road, instead of going down the road, making a silly mistake, we run over them and kill them. It goes in the press, truck kills somebody else, it wasn't our fault. We are not recognised for that. And we need somewhere where I can talk to people such as yourselves. I can get them in the truck. And the point I'll leave you with, if I haven't gone too far,
you can go.
I had a gentleman from the NTC. Now, one of the people involved in National Road Freighters, of which Gordon is a part,
yep,
came to me at the Melbourne Truck Show 4 years ago and he said, "Congratulations, Rod." I said, "What have you done?" "What have I done?" He said, "You had a bloke in the truck." I said, "Yes." Now, this gentleman, and a nice bloke, nothing wrong with the fellow, he was at a meeting prior to doing a trip with me, and he was a bureaucrat. Nothing is held against bureaucrats. They only have a limited scope of knowledge of our industry. That's
Yep.
the problem.
Yep.
He went there and he said, "You will do this and you will do that and this is the law and you will do what we tell you to." He came and did a trip. He rang me up and he said, "I'm going to do a trip with you from Melbourne to Albury." I said, "No, you're not." And he looked somewhat askance. And I said, "You either come with me from Melbourne to Dubbo or you don't come at all. Because if you come straight up the Hume Highway from Melbourne to Albury, you see the best rest areas in Australia, perhaps not the best road now, the Pacific is better and the Hume is not being maintained to what it should be." I've rang only last week and put in a complaint about a section of the Hume.
Yeah.
So they're not maintaining that. I said to him, "You have to come past Albury and see what the rest of our roads are like." Now, he did that trip. He said he learned a lot from it. 2 weeks later, he was at a meeting about logbooks. And it was that they came to me and said he did a 180-degree turnaround in his understanding and knowledge of the industry, and he was a lot more amenable to listening to our problems. Now, if you've had some time in trucks, so I don't know how much time you spend in a truck or yourself, it's one thing for you to say, "I believe you will operate safer if we do this." It's another for you to come in the truck, see it from our point of view, and you don't have to spend a week. A lot of drivers would say every new driver's got to spend a day or a week in a truck, and every politician and everybody that works for RMS that is involved in trucks should spend a week in a truck. You don't need a week. But an hour is not enough. You've got to spend a day. You've got to have some understanding of what our needs are. If we could educate those people to provide better legislation and fairer legislation, and I've written a submission to this inquiry. I wrote 7 to the NTC Heavy Vehicle National Law Review. I've done that for the last 20 years. The one point I will leave you with is our green reflector marking of informal truck bays.
Yes.
I was driving fuel tankers. I drive B-doubles, so B-doubles are restricted to what routes they can operate on. I went into Sydney in a single semi-trailer. I had 33,000 litres of petrol on. I was coming home over the Great Western Highway through the Blue Mountains, and I was tired. I should not have been on the road. But there was no rest areas. There was nowhere to stop safely. If I'd have pulled up 2 inches off the side of the road on a bit of shoulder and gone to bed and maybe ended up in heaven or hell when someone ran into me and they'd have died as well, that's no good. As I drove along, you're thinking, oh, Jesus, look, there's a big bit of dirt. I could have stopped there, but you can't see it. There was no marking for it, and I didn't know the road, so I didn't know whether the next rest area was 5 kilometres or 50 kilometres. In the end, I drove to Molong. I should not have been on the road. I pulled up, went to bed. I got onto a bloke from RMS and I said, if I knew that road, or if there was a way to mark those bits of dirt, I could safely have pulled up and had 15 minutes over the wheel. I could have got out, walked around the truck, kicked the tyres, had a stare at the stars for a minute, and then been safe to travel to the next rest area and go and have a proper decent sleep. I said, why don't we mark these bits of dirt with reflectors? And he said, well, how are we going to do that? So, well, the reflectors are there, the guideposts are there. It's simple, cheap and effective. We just put the reflectors on the guidepost, 3, then 2, then 1. In 2003, I went to Canberra for the National Road Safety Inquiry. There were 33 recommendations from that inquiry, of which I had a hand in 5. 2 of them were mine. One was specifically about marking those bits of dirt, informal truck bays, with green reflectors. It is now in our National Rest Area Standard, which I pushed to get done, and that was redone, and it's included. But I started doing that 19 years ago. I have personally gone out and done the Newell Highway. I'm not allowed to. I can't get RMS to give me authority to put reflectors on guideposts. I have drivers telling me I have saved their life because they were tired, but they were travelling down the road, they saw the 3 reflectors, then the 2, then the 1, they knew there was a safe spot to pull up. They pulled up, they walked around the truck instead of going on and on until you get to that point where you just fall asleep and you crash. Now, I cannot get that approved in any way, shape or form. I've had the head of the NHVR and the NTC say it's a terrific idea. I did get some funding to do the Newell 2 years ago, but I cannot get RMS, TMR, Vic Roads, anyone to approve me, and yet they won't do it.
Can I just interrupt there? Sorry, Rod. And I'd ask, I'm asking Trish here, I think it was Sarah, have we got submissions from RMS or Vic Roads? Do we know? Well, while we don't know, while we're thinking, can I suggest, Senator Rennick, that we write to Vic Roads, we write to RMS, we invite them to answer the questions that have been posed today, we invite them to put in the submission, and we want to hear from them. So, Rod, we'll carry on that line of questioning for you.
So, as I say, my frustration is we don't have enough rest areas. We are losing them when someone says, and a perfect example just north of here, there used to be a big shoulder we used. Truck pulled in there, it was dirt. As he pulled out, he had trouble with traction because it had rained. The RMS closed the parking bay. You go up to the Hume Highway on Marulan.
It wasn't sealed.
No, it was not, no. But it was a spot that we could pull off safely.
Yep.
You go up to Marulan, there's a big area used to be called Logbook. Big section before the weighbridge.
Why would it be called Logbook? No, keep going.
They put Armco from end to end along that section of road.
Armco? That's that wiring, isn't it?
No, this is the steel before the wiring. The wiring's a whole other problem.
Yeah.
But they completely closed that off.
Okay. Sorry, Rod. Sorry, mate, media. First, we've got some standing orders of the Senate, hold 5. I'd first ask Senator Rennick, do you have any problem with the media taking? Now I've got to ask the witnesses. Rod, do you have any problem with yourself being splashed across every trucking magazine or local paper around the nation? You don't? Feel free, Cobber. Now, there are rules, mate. You can come up. I'll give you the opportunity if you want to take a photo from the side of Mr. Hannifey, you can, or any other witness, but you can't photograph any of the paperwork, mate. Otherwise, we send you off to a jail on an island somewhere for the rest of your life. All right, thank you. Sorry, Rod.
No, you're right, mate. So, with rest areas, we lose them. There's another one. Remind me about the wire rope in 1 second.
Sure.
But there are other sites that we have used And Colo Vale Hill, there was a parking bay up there. We used to be able to pull up, top of the hill, the best place for a truck. You just roll into it, slop, you get the gravity as you pull out of it. They were fixing it. They put up Armco. I rang up. I said, what's going on with this rest area? Oh, we're going to fix it up because it did have potholes in it. Fantastic. 2 weeks later, Armco from end to end. Every time
they fixed the potholes?
No. And that was their argument. Again, an RMS bloke. Now, you've got 3 lanes coming up to this hilltop. There was a very wide, large shoulder. And I mean, it would have been 5 metres wide. Because you had the 2 lanes merge virtually at the same point where that wide shoulder was, you could pull out of the shoulder onto the highway. But an RMS car came up there, a truck pulled out in front of him, he had a problem, let's close the parking bay. Don't fix it so the truck could safely accelerate through those potholes that weren't there. Just close the whole thing off end to end. So every time we lose one of those spaces, then that happens in this district and the next district, and then you multiply that by the states. And then someone comes along and builds 1 truck bay with 10 spaces. And they say, oh, we fixed your problem. What's wrong with you? We've just spent $1 million. And again, they built a rest area at Taree. They paid $25,000 a set for a triangular table that you can't put more than a magazine on. You can't open that magazine on it. Now, and then I say, but what's the good of that? We need more rest areas. We are happy to have a bit of dirt as a start, and that's where the informal bays are ideal. If they're no good, they've spent virtually no money to put them in. The maintenance of the reflectors, some of them are out there, they've been there for over 10 years, so they don't fail, except if someone runs over the guidepost. I've given them lists of all the sites that I've done, and again, I'm leaving myself wide open here because I've said, when I've got the money, I will do any course you want me to do, OH&S, I'll wear a flashing light on my head. I'll do whatever you want if you will allow me to mark these sites because we don't have enough and because I've asked you for 16 years to do it and you haven't done it. I can show you dozens of emails, letters to every single minister that's involved with road transport in Australia for the last 20 years.
Could you supply that to the committee, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And yet, I've had to go out and do it myself. And I had drivers save their life. All we want is decent places to sleep. The wire rope, you say, when they first started that on the Hume Highway, I rang and put in a complaint. Previously, anywhere on the Hume Highway, if you blew a tyre, if you hit a roo, if you needed a leak, God forbid, that one of us wants to go to the toilet because there's not enough places, you could pull up on a safe shoulder, you could pull safely off the road, you could step out of the truck and be clear of the roadway. Now that they've run the wire rope from end to end, if you virtually touch the wire rope with the left-hand side of the truck, you are stepping out into the lane of 100 km/h traffic. So I complained at first and said, you've now destroyed it. You've made it unsafe for us to pull up. And if you go down there now, there would be at least a dozen roos dead on the side of the road. Now, when you hit a roo, you can't just keep driving. You've got to pull up and make sure you haven't torn an airline off or put a mudguard back with a bolt to rub through a tyre. We can't even do that safely. I said, we need bays to be able to do that. They said, oh, we'll put some in. I said, how am I going to see that bay at night? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm driving along at 100 kilometres an hour and I'm looking for somewhere and I go, there it is there. I said, what's the good of that? Well, what do you want? I said, I want you to mark those bays. Now, they have come back to me in the last month. They are building big overlap bays now. So the wire rope, instead of running right along the highway, starts out to the side and then it starts here. So you still can't go through it to the trees. And I understand they're there to stop cars running into the trees. But even on the Craigieburn bypass, which has a 10-metre shoulder with not a single tree on it, that wire rope is now right on the footpath. I can't, and I broke down coming out of Melbourne recently. I had a fuel problem. I had to drive for 2.5 kilometres at 2 kilometres an hour before I could find a safe shoulder because I couldn't even step out of the truck to see what the problem is. We can't get people to come and do repairs on trucks because you can't get safely off the road. So they are now listening and they're making these overlap bays, but you can't see them at night, and they've said they will mark them with green reflectors, but they haven't done anything. And every single one of these avenues I put forward, generally they are simple, cheap and effective. They have some common sense, which I understand people don't recognise. They will make our industry safer, and yet I can't get people to help me to achieve them. And it just frustrates the hell out of me.
Yes, I don't blame you, Rod. So let's see how we can help you with that. And I know that you need to get going down and continue your day's work. But I just want to clear one thing before you cop any abuse from the Maddies that may have heard, and I'll wear the blame here, so we'll do it arm in arm. When you talked about you didn't care if someone came from Alaska or Atlanta, so before you get accused of being all the other things that you're not, it was this committee that uncovered the exploitation of the Australian visa system, where there was a crook.
Yes.
And that's the nicest thing I'm going to use, the crook up in Coffs Harbour or Tweed's Head or wherever the crook was.
I think there was more than one, unfortunately. Yeah, one in WA as well.
That one got put too. Working for the other crooks up there, and we had 100 and, I can't remember exactly, Senator Rennick, there was some 120 or 130 licences issued. When we contacted the Queensland Department, the Queensland Minister said this is happening under your nose. 84 of them were given back straight away, so you weren't being racist or anything. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
Rod, just so we get that very clear. There is exploitation of Australia's foreign visa system. And we have truck drivers, and a well-known one was doing a K&S Scots, I think it was, and there were a couple of foreign drivers on there and got stuck under the M5 and not only couldn't back the B-double, but they couldn't even uncouple it. So
yes.
Thanks for raising that. Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to invite any members of the committee to do a trip, genuine, for a day, and happy to contribute in any way that I can.
Well, I'll tell you now, Rod, I will definitely be there. So, Senator Rennick, did you have any further questions? There's a lot of to take up there, and this is just scratching the tip of the iceberg. But we understand that, Rod. We appreciate, mate. We want to hear from every member of the road transport family, whether they're employed drivers, whether they're forkies, whether they're receival staff. And my lady used the word owner drivers. I keep getting, in Western Australia we call those of us that own the truck and drive are owner drivers. I'm still going to use that, but then we've got towies and we've got independent contractors and everything. So anyway, everyone, small, medium enterprises. Rod, thank you very much, mate, and I thank your employer for allowing you the opportunity to pop in and share your knowledge with us. We know where to find you, mate.
Yep.
Is there one last thing you want to add before you head off?
Just that if people recognise that we go to work with one thing in mind, and that is to get home safely to a family that we don't see enough of, I think that would change things. But getting that message out, getting proper accident investigation. I do support the ATA saying that our accident should be involved properly and not just that truck driver did the wrong thing.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, I think that would help people see things truer, and that information that's used against us, I would ask that the government do something to mandate that is given out accurately and sufficiently. Not, they had a big thing on TV, all these trucks were speeding. I said, okay, how many of them were doing 101? Yes, it's breaking the law, but they were filming at the bottom of a 2-kilometre descent. They got on the TV, they said, look at all these speeding trucks, and I rang them and said, how many were doing 101? Sorry, we're not allowed to disclose that information, they were breaking the law. So they are more than happy to hang us, but they won't help us. And that is just very disheartening and makes it very hard to get people into the industry, to get recognised for what we do, and to get people to listen to us when we put a suggestion forward to improve both our safety and that of everybody else.